This is Real Goal 7. You're watching A History of Generations. Death Angel Rockaholic decided I can do this one. I seem to like doing these videos. I guess I just like educating you guys. So, you stuck around for more? Well, then perhaps you would like to hear about Generation X, who are now parents today. They started out in 1970, and the last bit of their generational culture came to an end in 1999, just before the new millennium, famous for changing the face of culture and starting a new social revolution. In the 70s, the youth of the hipster period started culture with the arrival of disco, which ultimately pursued electronica. A time when the mainstream media replaced industrial media, and hipsters started non-conforming as well as rebellious rock cultures. Generation X first fell in love with hard rock as the deepest form of guitar play ever heard, a time when many of the pioneered rock genres sprung into existence. In the later math of the decade came the greatest rock and roll rebellion known as punk rock. Controversy came with the Sex Pistols swearing on national television or even world television, especially their unloyal song dissing the Queen of England. TV became censored afterwards. Color TV was introduced in the late 70s for Generation X to experience something more phenomenal than the first TV. Hot rods came into the market, replacing the classic car and even minivans to completely remove station wagons. Disco fever caught on. Regardless, the biggest face in this early Generation X time was also the first Hollywood rock star, Steve Tyler of Aerosmith, godfather of rock and roll. There was also Anne Rice, who wrote the first sort of popular romantic vampire fiction known as the Vampire Chronicles series, and lastly Stephen King, who was famous for thrillers and horror novels. The fashions of the time were simply old school rock and roll apparel such as leather jackets, bomber vests, jeans, shorts, high tops, or the earliest tennis shoes, as well as simple dress shirts. Some went for a more flashy disco look of being very colorful or had a hooligan look of the street punk. Skateboards were big as the first came out, as well as the first dirt bikes. Next were the first video games, known as the early Atari system of games like table tennis, Tetris, and Pac-Man. The first record tapes came in this time, especially the first clubbers and the first cage dancers. It all ended with the rise of glam. The underground started in this time with punk rock. The common name for underground music is also called garage music. Punk rock and heavy metal were leaders in inventing countless subgenres, though new wave has no relation to either. New wave spawned from electro rock, a subgenre of art rock, which also brought the rise of glam rock, subculture and influenced emo culture in the future. The underground got shy exposure in the late 70s. In the 80s, Generation X experienced the first modern renaissance in a decade known for hair bands and new wave, even teen pop. A decade when the mainstream seized control of culture and society through TV stations like MTV and Much Music. A time when the greatest pop stars rose, such as Madonna, a leader of women in the 80s, and Michael Jackson, who was a popular figure to guys. Also a decade some very famous people made their debut, such as Cliff Burton, the greatest metal artist ever, David Bowie, godfather of glam, Peter Murphy, godfather of gothic rock, Siouxsie Sioux, Robert Smith, Mike Score, a head figure of the 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Winona Ryder, and Oprah. They experienced variety shows, game shows, talk shows, late night shows, soaps, and family sitcoms. This decade came with fashion explosion and massive pop culture driven entertainment, yet as classic rock, hard rock, and even southern rock continued, glam rock and hair metal rose, having a massive audience during the early part of the 80s. Later came the rebellion known famously as thrash metal, sparking the heavy metal scene, which was made as an alternative for those tired of the glamour parade. Fashions were everywhere, from a rah-rah dress to spandex suits, but sometimes it receded to biker fashion, bringing rock and roll rebellion, the barbarianism to such cultures of preppy metalhead, and glammy were new, even as old as they actually were. That was all next to punk culture, which continued in quiet. Division between the Hollywood rocker and the garage rocker was established this time, as the late 70s, introducing the rockaholic. Fast cars, cool styles, outrageously popular fashions, and being famous was all the rage of the 80s. Underground rock, having been around since the 60s, witnessed psychobilly, punk rock, new wave, and then faced gothic rock, industrial rock, emotive hardcore, indie rock, alternative rock, grunge, and rebel rock. The underground media made room for creative and imaginative passion, as it did for new ideas, inventions, and newer creators. Punk rock from a decade before went through a factional division between the Hollywood punks and hardcore punks. Most common and popular punk rock-born genres came from Hollywood punk throughout Generation X's history. The biggest phenomenon of the 80s was the breaking